Hello, my name is Tara Seren, and I am a whole cycle doula and a shamanic practitioner. And I'm here to explain to you what a whole cycle doula does and connect with you in the five directions that I work with on the North Star medicine ways. Most of my practices have come through experience and through experiential learning, and also working and sweating and sitting in the central fires of many different types of cultures and lineages, and getting that understanding from all of them, and time traveling home into my ancestry and into the future. So with the whole cycle doula work, I work with birth, death, transitions. And so there's all sorts of different ways to um, access the veils, what I call the four to five veils of transformation. And so when I start to talk about them, I talk about the different directions of the wheel and how we sit with and how we work with people no matter what we're doing, and what arena, what scenery we're working in. Right? So when we walk into, usually and most always, we're stepping into the West. No matter what, even if we're coming into the East, I feel like we're working with the South and to the West almost every single time I'm working with a client. Now, I might notice on the wheel what direction they initially come in, but most all the time somebody has something that they are letting go of, or composting, or coming into transformation. So I get to sit in the South in this way of understanding from the grandmothers or the intuitive thought. Um, what is this client working with? What's coming in to this field, and what are they letting go of, and how are they going to come full circle around the wheel? And so when that happens, most oftentimes people are standing in the West, but sometimes they might come in and stand in the East and be like, I have this great vision, or I'm having a baby, or I'm standing in the East and I have this understanding of what my family wants, during this time of connection and letting go, and the passing and the transition of a family member, a loved one, and or a being that's not going to make it very far into this world for whatever reasons that arises. So I also work with abortion and suicides, and helping family members come out of grief, and work with grief, somatically, so we can discharge it. I utilize the arts in that way, and quite traditionally the shamanic arts, from rattle making to drum making, painting, and just being in experience, healing on the lands, and receiving and connecting through journey work, and sometimes psychedelic work and rites of passage. So in that aspect, when we understand that we're working with a place of transition, I'm coming in and witnessing from the South, saying, okay, what's my intuition here? This person's in the West saying, this is my story. This is where I come from, and this is where I'm going. So always am I starting the wheel in the West and in the Southwest. And we create an altar, whatever that looks like. When I walk into a pregnancy or a death scenario, I'm almost always wanting to check, well, where are we on the directions, and where are we in the veils, and who is standing where? And so when I come in to sit with anybody, if I don't have a ground, and I've got Aunt Sally and Uncle Joe talking to me about all different things, and they're in the north maybe, or in the south, I'm going to pay attention to how they're bringing their communication over. And initially, and when I want to find my ground, I'm going to go to my client's feet and sit with them and bring the center into their container, their vessel, and around them. And so in that way, we understand it's setting up an altar can be just a presence in the room. So sometimes we bring that altar and that central fire, and we put it right with our chi. We can manifest warmth and great heat, just like a fire, and transformation and healing with our hands and our chi. So when I come into a room and I don't see a ground, or I can't see a complete clear direction, I'm always going to go to that fifth element, that central fire, that alchemization of self, and also the drum work that we're working with, right? Which is the element of time. And sometimes heartbeat is the drum. And so I'm going to bring in, set up my altar, check in with my client, and just be present and see what occurs to me. A lot of the work that I do is about what occurs in the moment and what is it that my client needs the most. I do trainings and teach often about deepening the healer's practice and journey, about how to open up what occurs to you and have that self-trust, not only just in physical affirmation, but also in how do I work the realms of energy and psyche, and how do I open up my heart to what occurs to me. And it's not about me, it's about what's happening around me, because my awareness comes full circle in this direction. And I'm the chi that walks with that fire, And as a practitioner of this medicine and these whole cycle doula ways, this is how we hold the container for that central fire to burn, to create, and for those around it to remember who they are. Okay? And I hope you're following me, because when we're in the West of transformation, death, and rebirth, like there isn't one without the other, right? And as we go into having children or having babies, we're opening to a new life. And so we do come from this place of the West in death and rebirth, compost, deep nourishment, really standing in that place and saying, okay, I'm ready to let go of what has not been a serving perception of this experience in my life. And I would like to seek wisdom and find something new. And so then I come around into the north. And usually on this altar where we're working now, if it's a rite of passage work, then there's an altar physically set. And we're working around it, and things get in motion, and things happen, and details are untangled and unfolding, and somatically we get to open up and lift up off our spirit, out of our bodies, be witnessed, and then tangibly be doing something like making a rattle or creating a drum or whatever it is. I also offer weavers, where we're actually engaging in this medicine that is tangible and visceral and age-old, time-old. It transports us back to our ancestors and to our descendants who will be doing the same things. We will always need a drum and a rattle. We will always want to invoke the rhythm of our soul, whether or not we use them for healing tools or not. These are mediums that I use to help open up and untangle the work that needs to be done to come full circle and in transformation. Now, in a birth, it's the mama is the altar, and in a death, whoever is sitting in the place of exiting and rebirth, in that death place, is the altar as well. And so when we sit at the feet of those in the lineage of all those who came before Mary Magdalene and Jesus, the beautiful lineages that we have in the shamanic tribes that teach us. Sitting at the feet can tell us so much. It helps the people feel understood, and it helps them bring awarenesses to themselves that may not have been perceived that it was an option, to allow ourselves to know the purpose and have full completion with it, not just dealing with herbs that we may or may not have an understanding of how they work with our body, and the full commitment to go through with the amount of dosages that you would have to go through to take care of yourself and that baby. So when I sit with women who want to choose that option, I think, what we have available, the pill, is really a great way to go through this kind of a ceremony, to actually sit at somebody's feet and say, hey, would you like to keep this child, to put into your garden, to bury, to have closure, to feel safe with, to connect to, because even though you can't bring it fully into this world and raise it, and we have that choice, it's not an abnormal presentation of death or life, and connect in these ways that don't perpetuate trauma going forward. And so when I sit down at a young woman's feet, or auntie and grandma are there because they know that she's going through this, and they had to go through it, and they were totally ostracized and went through all sorts of things that we shouldn't have to go through to make our choices in life. And one of the biggest things that we make as a parent is a choice about our child. And so when I sit with a woman going through abortion, there's no denying we are mothers, and we are moving through this starseed baby, through our uterus, out into the world, just like any other mother. And we walk with this reality that it's also passing. And so we have this understanding that by facing who we are and knowing that it's our choice, that this is how mothers make choices, we're not bypassing a deep understanding of who we are, or neglecting or repenting, this decision that could be the best for all involved. And so when we acknowledge that decision and we walk into the north and we do that hard work, bringing that starseed baby in, clearing, smoking the tobacco, and saging and singing and talking about the stories. How did we get here? How did grandmother feel when she had to do it in secret? How did auntie feel? And how, the healing can happen multi-generationally when we sit in that circle together. And when that healing happens, grandmothers heal, aunties heal, because they actually get to be acknowledged. They had to go through this too. And they are now in their 60s and 80s and hundreds, and they are still living, breathing, incredible, amazing women. Maybe some of the strongest you've ever known. And yet, to acknowledge this piece of loss and grief, and that you have motherhood, and that you have an understanding of sexuality, and it doesn't have to be taken from you in those moments. And we moved into that awareness of the north, and we get gentler with ourselves, because there's nothing else holding us. We're stripped down in the north to just spirit in us. That red road, that soft bay, the horizon, that wandering, the one that knows, the one that understands. And we give that vision and that understanding of a gift of forgiveness, awareness, love, self-love. And then we come into the east, and that's shared. And as we share that medicine and we see the healing and the lineages, we come around to the south and we prepare again. Well, what is it that I really want? But we get to go through that cycle and return and come into the center again and check it out. You know, maybe next time I'm going to be, more conscious and aware that this is a being, a life being that I'm bringing in, or maybe this is something I know that's never for me, and so, um, you know, I want to have those kinds of practices in place that I am taking care of not just my body but my soul, and how my soul reacts to grief and loss and the choices I'm making. And so I feel like when we sit in those aspects, we're asking people to be accountable to each of the directions of how they move through. And so, in that same right, when we're sitting with death, we're walking into the south and saying, well, what's the communication here? And then into the west, and what is it that's being, released? Where are we on the veils? In death, the veils come in, and one of the first things that we go through is facing mortality, facing the fact that this is it. We're saying, I'm waiting for it. Is it ever going to come? It can be on both sides of the spectrum. I'm not ready. I didn't prepare for it. I've not ever been ready to die. Or I can't wait. I can't. It's not coming fast enough. What am I supposed to do? I think we step into that Western awareness of what is the work that we need to do before we clear our palette to move into the transition ahead and that horizon. And that's kind of why I wore this swan feather today, because when I do and teach psychopomp or work with psychopomp and helping the dead cross over, I often see the swans at the edge of the horizon, there, swimming in the sea of sunshine, waiting for those who have fear about crossing over. And there's a grace and an element there of patience, of forgiveness, of not pushing through to the other side, of saying goodbye and imprinting everything that we need to imprint before we go, and of preparing, for those who are looking and they see, oh my gosh, this is scary to me. And how do I go in a little further and deeper and ask what's really being said, what's really being asked of me here? And so when we go into that West, we're being asked that. Let's go a little deeper. What's really being asked of me? This is one of the veils. And then during this time of veils, people are busying themselves. They're grieving already. They're opening up. They're trying to figure out. And it can be a hubbub. It can be people physically feeling ill. There can be all sorts of things going on in the West. And when we come in as a death doula and we sit down at someone's feet, that's when we start to tap into what really needs to happen here. How do I help doula this situation into the flow of the directions, right? How do I doula this? How do I come in and spin the cauldron? How do I come in and I waft the sage smoke or the lavender smoke in here, into the hospice, into the hospital, into the home, wherever we are, that our altar is already right there in front of us, getting some sun rainbowy. So these are the questions that we're asking ourselves when we work with the wheel, when we work as a doula. I'm not going to come in and start performing my fire in the middle. I'm going to come in and say, hey, how do we open this chi up to give the best experience for this family, for these people that are going through? How do I facilitate, right? So I'm not really even giving. I'm just sitting in that moment and facilitating. And so when we move from the West and we have that moment, we come into the veils of of the north, and in the veils of the north, that's when some of the hard shit starts happening, and excuse my language, as the hard stuff starts happening. Deep, deep emotions coming through, processing, this is, the same thing as with the baby, oh my God, we're going into birth, and it's not happening as planned, and what are the things that we need to let go of to help the flow move. And there's usually a place of deep emotion that comes in through the north, a processing or an understanding that helps us gain some sort of vision or understanding about ourselves in a way that we didn't really understand before. And so, yay. And so that north gives us that vision, but you'll see it in the veils of birth and death. Like, oh my goodness, okay. Well, maybe we need to sit down, and I know I need to walk, and I need to talk with you and tell you about these things that have been bothering me, or tell you about this amazing story, or whatever. My grandfather and I always walked with my brother, and it's just meant the world to me. I'd love to sing this song. Family members have a big role and a big part in both birth and death and transition. Even when we're sitting at the wheel with a young woman learning about her menstrual cycle, or we're sitting in that sweat lodge or building a drum with the young man, learning about what's the next step for him. Does he have the courage to stand in his own self and say, I can go around that wheel. I can stay those so many nights out and get the knowing of myself, and I have the support of these people, and this is what's really important coming in from the south to the west to the north. It's not planned, and it doesn't come in on a step-by-step plan. It's organic. And organic, innately, is really one of the healthiest process for anybody, because you can't plan it. You don't know who's going to open to it. And as a facilitator, it can be a very interesting and joyful, fulfilling process to stand in the place of the South and listen to where everybody is and bring it into the facilitation and make room for the songs, make room for the stories, make room for the silence, or whatever needs to be to happen to help the flow of birth, death, and transformation. Coming into the east, as we sit there in the east, that's the next veil that flows. That's when we're starting to say, oh my goodness, those things have been flowing. All those things have occurred. And everybody, grandmother and, brother and sister, they're all gone home. They've said their goodbyes, and it's just you and me now. And there's going to be this epiphany, this aha moment of, you need to be alone, or you need to be with Uncle Joe, or whatever, to pass on. And everybody will say their goodbyes, things will be said of what they need, and same in with birth, that next veil comes in, and all of a sudden, those people who wanted to be there, who didn't need to be there, they're no longer there. They have said their well wishes, and they have stepped out respectfully to allow for the flow to progress, however that looks like. Those who have been helping the flow are in the kitchen cooking, they're over there painting, they're at the movement of that place of listening to the deep, deep, deep regret or sadness of the loss, and the joy and the elation of having your own life ahead of you in so many ways, and in transition and rite of passage, when we give up that deep, deep longing, that grief cry for that transformation. and that's in the east. Somebody's born, somebody's died, somebody has renewed themselves, somebody's just found out about themselves for the very first time. And we work whole cycle on this piece. And when we come back to the center of it all, we open our hearts to the decline in knowing that we are going to go in and alchemize the wisdom so we can take that journey again. Not only so we can take that journey again, so we can also teach it to our youngers. If we haven't passed the threshold, how can we teach it to others? And death is one of those mysteries in particular, because none of us can cross it and then say, this is what happens. And so we have to trust in death, and it may be one of the biggest teachers, birth and death on either end. We have to learn about the trust within and what occurs to us so that we can open up to the veils that are passing through, that are giving us direction, that are showing us which way to go, that are saying, hey, it doesn't have to be so hard. Wow, here's this amazing being, coming into birth, and prepare. You're going to be with them for a long time. Birth is one of the easiest parts of being a parent. And yet it's one of the most referenced and traumatic experiences you can ever have. And death is one of those pieces where we don't know, but simply the fight for life is so real. It's so strong. And then when you go, it's a simple exhale. We have no idea what's on the other side of it. And yet, there are things that occur that are unexplainable with the rational mind, that energetically show us that we are not alone, that our prayers have been received, that somebody's left in a good way, that somebody's still here trying to connect whatever they weren't able to in this life. And there is room for sitting with people who are pushing past an edge that feels so strong. And it's almost like dying and being born at the same time. And we have the understanding that we can sit in these ways and cross the thresholds of death and dying, and birth and birthing, through clearing, psychedelic work, healings, and rituals of rite of passage that symbolize somatically moments of deep, deep change and trigger the resilience of the human body to go through and open up further and further and further into this viscerally exciting, challenging life that we experience in our bodies. We embrace the perspective of all of our senses and all of our emotions. Pain ceases to be the only one. And we understand that there's more to suffering, more responses to suffering than simply the grief cry. And movement in our bodies, in our hearts, and taking the creative risk and leap towards opening further and further, further and further, and deeper into the world of curious inquisition of life and the fight for it. And on the other end, surrender and the great, great release and relaxation that comes with it. When we let our bodies open up to the senses, feel it all the way through to the quantum spaces in between. And those are what's called the veils. Now I'm going to put on a piece that I was able to talk with a friend in walking, and I'm going to invite you to take a little walk with me as we walk around the wheel. But I wanted to share this piece, an introduction of who I am and what I do in this world is to not just walk in the clinical way of birth, death, and transitions, and abortions, and suicides, and the whole cycle of normal presentation of the abnormal aspects and feelings of life, And while it's super important to know the medical aspects of all of these pieces and to be learned and trained into it, these are things we can learn. There's many certificates out there for each aspects of the doula, of the death doula, of the rite of passage facilitator, the midwife, all of these aspects, right? Yet the ability to affect energetics on a quantum level, to be observant and able to step outside of yourself enough to know what is going on the larger arc and the progression of the situation and the experience, and to be able to lay down your altar wherever it is without having to necessarily have a Mary Poppins bag with you, but knowing that the altar that you lay out, that you set out, is the moment you make connection. The fire is within you. It's always in that central fire. In the North Star medicine ways, the elements and the directions that have been revealed to me reflect a study of cultures that I have studied in my college career and in my experiential career. And yet, when I stood in the North and asked for a vision, what came through when I stepped out into the East was to be observant and to watch how people move through that central fire. And that central fire came to me and said, you have courage enough to place it. Those who sit with it will remember who they are. And so I work with people in the client aspect to help them remember who they are, where they're going, and how to move through those veils. And I also help teach that in with holistic practitioners or any kind of practitioner that wants to open to holism and to address things from an integrated point of view, not just one aspect, because we're multi-dimensional beings. And the sacred geometry of the spiral path and the star affirm and confirm it. And so the work of the whole cycle doula is to go around this wheel with you, to make you know, help you understand that it's always about you when we're working with you. We always learn something about ourselves. And we learn the best lessons through what unfolds organically, what opens our hearts to what occurs, and to see the blocks and the the hardships and the challenges release and open and unfold to, as Pablo Neruda would say, I laid my pen to the paper and the heavens unfolded and opened. And here we are. I could not have written it. I wouldn't want to, because it's in the experience of the movement that true alchemy, alignment with our natural process, can happen. So I hope you enjoy the small sitting by the fire and a walk with me as I describe a little bit more in depth of the 4 directions.
Well, you're sacred. You know what I mean? And when we treat each other as such, then the altar flows in a way that feels transformational. And so, in that aspect, I feel like that's how we're looking at the 4 veils, or, the 4 elements and the 5 elements, and that last element of time and space, and how the veils move both in birth, transitional parts and aspects of life, and death, and all those in between, even if it means it's controlled in some way, like abortion. Even if it's a mama coming into her full term, or a mama choosing not to have a child and still give birth to a beautiful star being, however long it's been alive. And so when I walk into a room with those aspects, and then also into death, always looking at where people are on direction. It can help us navigate immediately. And if you cannot find your ground, the first and foremost place to go is your client, to their feet. And all of a sudden, focus goes on them. And that's a healing that is in time-old, age-old traditions, passed down from the lineages of the woman healer and that Mary Magdalene archetype to Jesus and that masculine shaman, space that was held in this time of patriarchy. And going to the core and the root of the matter of the feet is paramount. To me, West is that place of death, what we came to work with. Well, I feel like asking yourself that question would be the better answer. Is there death without rebirth?
Well, no, but I guess I'm asking, is the fire in the West?
No, the fire is in this middle. It's in the central. It's always the North Star in the ground, so that when these altered states of being, or what we call the veils, pass through us, we are working with a grounded central focus that we are tethered to as an umbilical cord is to the mother. And we won't lose ourselves even when we want to run away. And we might. And then 20 years later, you get back to north.
So what is so west, and then it goes to the north? What is the north?
North is that looking at self in that gentle and compassionate way of saying, I've toiled up this mountain and I don't think I had to. You know?
Yeah. Self-forgiveness.
And just saying, oh my God, but I know I came here for that rock or that herb or that knowing right there. And then even if you still didn't get your lesson, maybe you prick your finger or something, you know, and it's you drink of the blood and you laugh about it.
Associate that with my hummingbird medicine in the north because it's been like the tower. It's like, oh, your soul is gonna elevate through this one.
Right. Well, and that's something I'm trying to teach my children in that transitional veils as well, is that, and not only my children, myself as well, that when the tower falls, it's one thing to say, oh, I went through that hardship to get there, which is a paradigm in this society that fuels us and leaves us exhausted and depleted and unsatisfied because we've never really alchemized the loss of what the tower represented. We still register it as a wound. When we can shift our perspective into this understanding that that is myself growing, or that is my skin shedding, or that's that baby coming out of me, you know, or that's whatever. Like, we don't pick up the pieces and carry them with us, and we don't try to rebuild it.
It's like a baby came out of the canal. You don't go back into the canal with pain.
No, you go on and experience more pain. But if you can establish a humor and say, oh my God, Odin, you took the prayer. You know, thank you. And that's what it means to be in gratitude. And so yet we have this whole philosophy in Buddhism that helps us understand suffering. We need to be in gratitude and non-attachment. But then you have a ton of people walking around going, chains, my chains, I'm in gratitude. You know, I'm suffering, therefore I have to be in gratitude. It's a forced will upon us versus, oh my God, look, it's like a garden. Look at how the stones fell. It's a huge 3 double spiral or a labyrinth, and I'm gonna make something new here. And this is perfect, and I don't have to go get any more new materials because the foundation work is here.
So where does that move you to in the east?
To planting the garden, you know, into the vision and opening to the possibilities of what does it bring. Oh, and death. I'm in awe of how after my mother died, all these people started coming in that I hadn't talked to in 10 years, you know? Well, they've been in your liminal energy and psyche all your memorable life, you know, and before. And now you're coming in, they're getting what they need. They're getting that ion from that fucking waterfall that just crashed down. That landslide that just sent negative ions all over the world. And this man needed it. And he's coming to you. And you are giving him medicine. And so they say when people in certain tribes in the native North America is that when you're in great grief, you're closest to God, closest to spirit, because you've broken wide open, and scientifically negative ions are flowing from you in your tears and in your heart pain and all the things, and your rawness coming off the mountain and looking to the east in the sun and going, my God, did anyone notice the flowers are dancing too, as the sun rises? And that's an equivalent of coming to your tribe and teaching a dance that is a soulful journey of what you've been through, your great grief cry, as Rilke have said, that this is my rite of passage, my message to the people, and you act it out, and then you look around and they're all dancing with you. And that feeling of elation is fulfilling and satisfying, and it tops everything. And then ask me what's in the south.
What's in the south? I knew it was coming.
Well, there's only natural progression, and of course we can zigzag into the elements and the directions, because we have various degrees of different things happening all at the same time. It's kind of like multi-managing a business. But when we naturally progress on a whole arc of the movement, of the whole picture, we decline. We go into rest, into rejuvenation, into tiredness, into the cave, and our journey there. And we're picking berries and nourishing self. Yes, so when we get there, that's that whole journey of decline. Is what happens on the way when everybody has stopped cheering your name. And the local news has copied your idea and everybody's doing it. And what do? I mean, you could get totally out of balance in the East in ego and be like, oh my God, we're going to pick this yellow dock for plant medicines today, connecting. But you could stay in the East in ego and then be catapulted into the West without ever going to the South by resisting the need to decline and to go home to the grandmothers. And
South is going home. The journey home.
Absolutely. It's the journey home to the West.
With your medicine.
Well, in a way with your medicine and in a way with not, because you've also just shared it. And you've received it, people have received it, and just like the full moon, there's a decadence, a waning. And that is the southern journey, and you have to get to that midsection of the moon to be like, oh, okay, I'm headed to the grandmother's. But before, it felt like maybe no one likes me anymore, or I'm lost with this child, I'm isolated, or I don't know what to do, and I want him out of suffering. And then the grandmothers step in and they say, hey, remember, and the friend comes over with some coffee, or the nurse comes in and says, yes, this is we're getting close, we're gonna start seeing this, and or, oh my God, I just don't know who I am, I'm never gonna make it in this world, I should just go, right?
Yeah.
And if we don't jump that edge physically, we get to jump it spiritually, emotionally mature. And that is the southern gift of the grandmothers, is emotional maturity and connection with the dream and the silence, something that nobody else can give you.
Like humble. In
Well,
a good way.
I stray away from the word humble because people associate it with false humility.
Yeah.
So if they're returning to the south with grandmothers in the way they went to the north to the grandfathers
Yeah.
of a repentant, then you might just skip, might as well just go back to the north. You know what I mean? But true humbleness is one that can accept with elation who you are and feast on your life. We're not talking, don't have that good roast beef, you know? We're not saying that. We're saying nothing else matters right now but your central fire and your direction to the mother. And all those other voices, while they may be grand or they may be telling you to stop and mend their life, it's in the south that you know the only life you can save is your own. And it's in that nourishment and finding that nourishment for self that you then are ready to compost. So you go through that harvest. And people think that the harvest is like this time of great abundance. This is the greatest, I'm the greatest, you know? But it's really about community. And so, you know, they say urus, you know, wealth come to the man who has wealth, but if he has no community to share it with, not so wealthy guy, right? Mm-hmm. And so when we're sitting in the harvest, it's not the harvest moon, it is not just elation and ascension. It is, oh my gosh, let's share this and prepare. I'm going to have pickled this, and I'm going to go within and make all these tinctures and all these things that are going to prepare me for when the decadence comes and that west, because I got another journey up the mountain to go. And we're always cycling through that cycle in that lodge, whether it's the death, the birth, the dream, you know, or the transitional, you know, and abortions and suicides are not exempt from this cycle. They're not abnormal presentations of life. They are part of it. And yet still sometimes in the liminal on the progression of a different direction, getting us to the larger arc, because there are wheels within wheels. And so you at the spiral way. And so when you ask me about what do I practice, well, I love practicing the Nordic and the runes and, you know, my trees and my Celtic self, and, you know, the Germanic in me flowing and the Danish. But, you know, I walk with Jesus too, and Mary, and they, very small ways that I've been taught, they continue to teach me, because these energies aren't owned by any one of us, and yet they have manifested in our practice, our human experiential practice, in all of us, in all these different ways. And the Mayans bring those wheels within the wheels, and, you know, the native North American bring, you know, many different fires of different understandings of the womb to the, you know, to the thunderbird, and all of these different plant understandings. And then we have the frost giants in the north, you know, and all the different, you know, movement tribes of Africa. And I feel like, how could I only acknowledge one, when to reject one part is to reject all of it? So the fire, the central fire, unites us all. in the ways of the direction and the energetic forces that became when the cosmos decided to be more than just itself. And it expanded and wrote the laws in which are ever changing and still infinitely describe the processes we all go through. And some other planet somewhere else might have a new perspective on it. However, it's just another place on the cycle, right? I have a feeling that their planets are looking up at our planets and stars and all those things. So how could we not be connected? You know, and it's on our world and in the roots of our trees and in the spores that connect us through the air. We are swimming in viscosity of connection of all aspects of the whole cycle.